Good afternoon, everybody. This is Gil Cedillo. I'm honored to be the chair of the Housing Committee. Wednesday, April the 11th, 2018. Hours 3:10. We have a full quorum. We're going to have public comment first for a total of 2 minutes. That will be the max. We have Herman. Yes. Two minutes, sir.
So since we're always on a discussion of affordable housing, and this morning with Mr. Becerra in council chambers, it's apparent that there continues to be no affordable housing. Why is that? Because I believe Mr. Becerra is a racist wetback who doesn't know shit about Trump ideas. And we're realistic about managed pipeline, because the only pipeline Mr. Trump plans to pipe is his big old foot up Becerra's ass for threatening the President of the United States over affordable housing. The same way the United States sued you jackasses under independent living for affordable housing. And these regulations that you call affordable have no community impact statement other than mine. Fuck you. And then on item 8, another relative report in effort taken by cities to preserve expiring affordable housing. Now, what the fuck is expiring affordable housing when there is no affordable housing? Because the young men and women that work for you can't afford to live on their own other than live with mommy and daddy and drive a nice fucking car and call that their home. Where I, a homeless person like myself, have class. I live in my fucking car. I live in my fucking house-to-house affordable so-called experience, because that's what America's all about. Taking white niggers like you, Mr. Dawson, and stop fucking with the community. Otherwise, that finger right there might slip right up your nose, motherfucker.
10 seconds.
And that's my point. We must continue to ask Trump administration to investigate why you white motherfuckers are fucking with affordable housing.
Mr. Wayne, please join us.
I heard something from a goat. Okay, so is this 1 minute and plus 1 minute, or my general?
Yes.
I don't get 2 minutes for all the items anymore?
You get 2 minutes in total.
Oh, come on,
Please,
man.
start his time at the beginning.
Come on. I mean, I can understand, I can understand the Uncle Tom doing it over here.
Start your time at 2 minutes.
I mean, so he's being sued in my federal lawsuit.
Put him at 2 minutes, please.
Yeah. You get 2 for the items and 1 for general. Because so here I get 3 minutes, right? I signed up for all the items in general, see? Because, we still got this lawsuit going on. We're suing Marquise Harris Dawson from 2016, but we got those judges over there in the federal court.
So you're correct at 3 minutes.
Oh, okay.
We'll correct that.
Okay. So Mr. Herman get another minute.
Go ahead.
You gave him 2 minutes. Okay, great.
Please proceed.
See, that's the way it is. Good. See, that's the reason why, Marchese. That's why Cedillo has never been named to one of these. See that? See, that's why your name is on here. Fool. Now, I would sue Paul Krikorian, but he's a goat.
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you ask this?
See, he's a goat. That's why I can't sue an animal. If I sue a goat, I can't sue a goat. So that's the reason why I can't sue him. But see, that's why Mr. Cedillo don't get sued. See what I mean? He tries to do the right thing. Because I know on Marchese's committee, he got that 1 minute Uncle Tom, 1 minute public comment, 2 minute Uncle Tom. And we're not going to go that way. See, you notice today's agenda, we have REAP. We've never had REAP here. Why do we have the REAP issues here? Because the grandfather of Uncle Tomism, Herbie Wesson Jr., made a motion to put it into committee, so when we go downstairs at our lovely meetings on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we can't give public comment anymore at the 10 a.m. meetings. That's why these are here. There's no reason for a housing committee to have to deal with REAPs, but they have to deal with REAPs because Herb wasn't trying to shut down public comment permanently, because that's what Marchese wants, and that's what all of his campaign donors want, right? That's right. See? He nods his head in agreement, and that's good, and that's what the federal papers are saying. That's what they're saying. So I get my additional minute. So, again, you're not going to shut down public comment. You try. You will try. You surrounded me, LAPD, last year, March 30th, with 20 officers because somebody had to make a fake 911 call saying I had a gun in my car. Okay? You guys have fucked with my law practice, you fucked with my life, you fucked with everything in my fucking life, and I'm still standing here. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you I'm a white nigger. That's what I am. I'm a white nigger. That's what I am. I mean, I can't help the fact I'm a white nigger. And sometimes I take transportation, and they call me in the west side of LA a transportation nigger because I use a train. But I'm proud of the fact I use a train. So like housing, you shit on people that are homeless. 10 seconds. You shit on people that don't have money. You worship money, and that's what it comes down to. Marchese will never own a house outright in his life. That's my prediction.
Patricia McAllister.
I get my 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay, first I'd like to start with number 7 here. This pipeline, AHMP. Now, I've been driving around using my gas looking at these HHH developments, or they're supposed to be developments, and I'm not finding any. Harris Dawson, I went to the address, nothing being done. I talked to some of the store owners. They said they're getting different dates. They're still there. Herb Wesson, same thing, not doing a thing. Current Price, same thing. I went to their addresses, talked to the people. The people know about this housing that's supposed to be built, and they're not getting a darn thing. So we don't need any reports. We need to start building. You think you're going to suck up that HHH money, you're alive, because I'm going to keep track of every development. Even that woman down there, Martinez, went to one of hers, nothing being done. Only one I've seen so far is Farrell. He's the only one that's doing his job. And we got black people sitting in tents right outside waiting to get in. So don't think you're going to put all those Mexicans and illegal aliens up in there. Now, number 8, here you want reports, and you want some suggestions on how to extend affordable housing. You should have asked me. Every time you bring in those housing department people, they tell you what to do. They act like they run the city. You all don't know what's going on. First of all, you need to take that state tax credit and provide a minimum of 50 years of affordability on that. Do that with the city credit, tax credit too. Now the city, you should commit to a new mandatory inclusionary housing policy. Okay, and then land leasing, as opposed to disposing of fee simple, land provided by public agencies for use as affordable housing. This would allow the city to retain control of that housing. And also you should increase your asset management capacity, okay, through a new division of asset management. And this allows the city to continually track both the physical conditions and the financial health of the buildings it has sustained. So what we're saying is we want to show you and teach you how to keep the public housing there. Now here's another thing, I think somebody's stealing. But anyway, we'll get to that last, I think. Now give me my 1 minute. 1 minute for public comment. Okay, my 1 minute for public comment. I'm a computer scientist, teacher, and done a lot of things in my life, worked for law firms, and I kind of know the game. And I think that the law department, the legal city attorney's office, they are the department that's ripping off this city. Everything that's going on, the legal department is doing it. That's why it's so cold-blooded. Now, for you to bring in these people here yesterday and tell them that bed and breakfast could only do 120 days when they have to eat 365 days a year, and I talked to some of the people down there, the illegal aliens, and I asked them why they're here. They said because we're not getting the business anymore. Okay, they want the business for those small motels. That's what's going on. I say, I know the game. I talk to people. They tell me stuff. So you gave the illegal aliens the right, and I'm going to tell you something about these illegal aliens. We're going to get them out of here. The wall is coming up, and if we have to drop a drone on these thousands of communities that they've taken over, we're going to get them. Don't think we're not. and I'm going to be on the front line.
One minute.
So you heard a pattern in practice under case number 216 CV 05655 JLSE demand for jury trial, Second Amendment complaint for damages for First and Fourth and Fifth and 14th Amendment to U.S. Constitution for what? Committee housing. In regards to what? What is my free expression? Well, let's read into omission and acts. Relating to individuals, what is constitutionality? It's called protected expression, Mr. Krikorian. Dealing with the poor, failed development of this committee, you violated our Safe Street Act. Stop taking fucking state and federal dollars and creating a pattern and practice of stealing.
Thank you. Your time is up. Let's go here. Okay, that concludes public comment. There are no other speakers. Can we address consent items 1 through 6?
Each one into the record. Item number 1, report from the Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department and resolution relative to removing the property located at 606 West Romulo Street from the rent escrow account program. This is case number 547890. Item number 2, report from the HCID LA and resolution relative to removing the property located at 2417 North Gate Street from the rent escrow account program. This is case number 556292. Item number 3 is report from HCID LA and resolution relative to removing the property located at 1156 South Fedora Street from the rent escrow account program, case number 411383. Item number 4 is report from HCID LA and resolution relative to removing the property located at 3746 South Glendon Avenue from the rent escrow account program. It's case number 605409. Item number 5, report from the HCID LA and resolution relative to removing the property located at 49 East Thornton Avenue from the rent escrow account program, case number 618484. And item number 6 is report from the HCID LA and resolution relative to removing the property located at 33 East Clubhouse Avenue from the rent escrow account program. This is case number 613316.
Motion to move all those items on consent? Move. Second. So be the order.
Next item. Item number 7 is the City Administrative Officer and HCID LA reports relative to affordable housing managed pipeline regulations and the 2018 AHMP call for projects. This item was referred back to the Housing Committee by Council action on February 27th, 2018.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Elliott, Manager of Multifamily at HCID. So as we just heard, there was a transmittal that was originally submitted, and to meet a tax credit deadline for the current projects, that was taken directly to council, and the regulations for next year were referred back to committee. So we'll report on those. So we're talking about opening the pipeline for 2019 projects. And the sources we have for that would be an approximately $28 million in federal home funds, and our 9% tax credit allocation, which is worth about $100 million. And there would be some proportionate share of $17 million of tax credits that are allocated to special needs projects on a statewide basis. So the changes that we made were in response to a number of comments that we got. We published these things back in September. We got over 100 comments from 40 different stakeholders, and most of the changes that we're making are technical in nature to align with other state state regulations. But some of the more notable ones are the terms for being in the pipeline. What we're saying is new projects can get a 12-month commitment and can get an additional 12-month extension if they're showing good faith efforts towards fundraising. And the projects that are still in the pipeline from 2016 will get until March 31st of next year to be fully funded. We're aligning our appraisal standards with that of the state, but we wanted to make clear that a tear-down project, it says an as-is appraisal, but what we really mean is that it's as if it's vacant. We're aligning our developer fee standards with that of the state. So we're increasing, on a tax credit project, we're increasing the maximum amount from $2 million to $2.2 million, and on a bond deal, we're increasing it to $2.5 million, plus $10,000 for every unit over 100, if that's deferred or put back into the project. So we have an existing, for several years, we've had an existing policy about relocation that if you're demolishing units, you have to put back at least double what you've torn down. But what we're finding out is that some of the buildings, in the Skid Row area particularly, that's just not possible because of the footprint and the existing density. And they've got a lot of small units. But our requirement for 2-for-1 replacement was just to really discourage relocation altogether. But these buildings usually have rental assistance built in, and within their if somebody wants to tear down one of those buildings, they usually have within their portfolio other places to put those voucher holders. So nobody's displaced in that kind of situation. So we thought it was only fair that people that can do that they can replace at least 1-for-1 of what they've got if 50% of those units are supportive housing. And so we have some of those lined up that'll probably come in this next round. We sort projects by transit-oriented development projects and non-transit-oriented projects so that they're not competing with each other. And what we've decided to do is align our definition of transit-oriented to be that of the new transit-oriented communities that planning has. And that includes trains and wherever 2 rapid bus intersections that have 15-minute headways overlap. So that includes, that's a broader definition than the state cap and trade program has. And it picks up a lot of the orange line in the valley. So we've made some changes to our competitive scoring system too. We've decreased some things and increased others to add emphasis. One of the biggest increases was to give more points to community-based housing development organizations. That's a federal acronym, and 15% of our home funds has to go to those kinds of organizations. And a lot of them in the 80s and 90s were place-based, like the West Hollywood Community Housing Organization or Hollywood Housing or East LA Community Corporation. And those groups have had to expand to survive. And as a result, some of them have lost their status as community-based because they're more of an at-large organization. So the thought here was that we want to encourage people to organize their board in such a way that they represent a low-income community. There may come to pass a time when we can't get at that 15% of the home funds because we don't have those sponsors that are organized that way. So we really want to encourage that kind of participation. And also we're increasing the points for community benefits. There's a number of projects of ours are built on the boulevards, and they have to have commercial space, which goes unused. And it not only looks bad, but it's a shame. So we thought that, especially with the Triple H facilities program, that maybe we could try to help co-locate those kinds of facilities in the ground floors of our projects. So we're increasing points for that. We're also increasing points for projects that are in difficult to develop areas, and that's kind of an outgrowth of a federal directive that was driven by our assessment of fair housing that was recently approved, and that's just to encourage development of projects in areas with access to opportunities. And we're also increasing points for projects that are over 50 units, because larger projects tend to be more cost effective. So to stay at 100 points, we're decreasing the points given to projected leverage, because that's money that people don't really have. And we're in general partner experience and property management experience, those are kind of those are points that everybody gets just by virtue of competing in the tax credit program. They have to have the maximum experience. So folks felt that we didn't need to necessarily weigh those as heavily as some of these other local objectives. So once this is, if the regulations are approved, we intend to open up a call for projects, which would be open for 30 days, and then there'll be a review period, and then we'll be back in front of you with recommendations, hopefully before the summer recess. That concludes my report. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Do you have anything?
I'm here to answer any further questions as well.
Mr. Krikourian.
No, I think that's good. Thank you. The report was sufficient, Mr. Chair.
Okay. What's the call for? Just one question. When is this call for projects?
Well,
You have
we're
a date?
prepared to open it up as soon as we get mayor's concurrence on the regulations. So,
Okay.
so yet this month, hopefully.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
One question. I'm sorry. This is I know. So close. But
Colombo.
giving 5 points for the new construction with 50 units or more, I get efficiencies of scale. But isn't 50 units the trigger for CEQA as well?
Yes, at this moment, yes.
At this point, yes. But, so we were seeing a lot of 49-unit projects because of that.
Yeah.
And the state also gives points for larger projects. So that's one of those alignment things. Now, under the PSH ordinance, that could change. And
I guess the reason I ask is because while there's cost efficiencies, there's time efficiency loss if you're over 50 units. And so, as a policy matter, I could see wanting to maybe prioritize those that aren't going to get held up by CEQA so that we can get units online faster. But
right. Well, at this point, the Triple H program is essentially non-competitive and doesn't have these rules. So that's not a factor in funding homeless projects. If that were to change, we could revisit this, but we wanted to align our resources, our regulations with that of the state as much as possible, because the smaller projects tend to be more expensive per unit. But there are some projects that, like for transition age youth, you don't want big buildings.
Right.
And so we will probably continue to do those kinds of special purpose projects, under the Triple H program.
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Move to adopt the recommendation?
Second.
Report? Yes.
Mr. Chair, would this be the recommendations of the CAO report?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Item number 8 is a HSID report relative to efforts taken by other cities to preserve or extend expiring affordable housing covenants. Mr. Chair, this item was continued on February 28th. It was originally agendized for the February 28th meeting, but it's been continued to today.
Good afternoon. Ed Gibson from Housing Community Investment Department. Joining me today is Franklin Campos from housing as well. Before you, we have a continuation of a preservation report from last year where we were giving an update on the status of where we were with preservation. And at that time, the Housing Committee had requested information regarding what other cities were doing with preservation. We were having a number of conversations with other cities at the time, but we've done additional research, and we've come back today with this report giving you some highlights. I can say, just as a quick overview, most cities are still continuing to struggle with the issue and having the exact tools and the resources and the exact places necessary to preserve their affordable housing stock as it comes together. As Franklin will go over in a moment, you will see a number of the things that we're doing, they're looking at, and vice versa. So we all seem to be moving in a very similar direction with the challenges. I'll let Franklin go through the review.
Good afternoon, council members. Franklin Campos, Finance and Development Officer. As Ed mentioned, we were here previously, and when we reported in the different initiatives, which include financial and non-financial initiatives, and what we were looking at was, and what we reported was on the number of at-risk housing that the department tracks. Currently, there's approximately 11,000 units that are at risk of expiring, basically terminating their covenants or rental assistance contracts. Approximately 71% of those are project-based Section 8. In terms of those properties, doesn't mean that they're continuously in annual renewals, or they will renew for 1 year, 5, or 20. And in terms of the properties that are restricted with city covenants or state covenants, basically that's it, they terminate. So some of those properties are under the RSO, some of those are not. And that's just to give you some background as to what we discussed last time that we were here in front of you. We also talked about the non-financial, other non-financial initiatives, which includes tracking the affordable housing inventory, but also working with owners, direct outreach, but also direct outreach to residents as well. And so that's been going on for many years now. And last year, our efforts were primarily focusing on outreaching to the owners and also looking at the former CRA portfolio. We researched various existing preservation programs in other cities and contacted several large cities, as you can see in the report. Some of those cities include San Francisco, Oakland, New York, Chicago, Seattle, and Boston. The information in the report is limited to basically what we were able to gather online, but also we did a lot of phone calling different cities and looking at what they were doing. The report highlights the programs and strategies for the city to further investigate and possibly adopt going forward. What we found was that most of the financial programs and incentives currently being offered by other cities fall into three distinct areas. One of those is acquisition of restricted and non-restricted affordable housing. The other will be rehabilitation programs. And the third one will be incentives related to the reduction of fees or taxes to stimulate or incentivize housing preservation, which at this time the city currently does not have. As Ed mentioned, our research and conversations indicated that preservation of at-risk housing is a challenge for most of the large cities. It's an owner-driven process. And the key to work with these issues is to have staff devoted to those programs and initiatives by also tracking, by also providing financing programs, which we've been doing. But it's also to create partnerships with different stakeholders. But also it's to have flexible funding sources. Last time we discussed flexible funding sources in terms of what is it that we can do to come up with different programs. Right now, the funding that we have in place is very restrictive, and now with the linkage fee, and we had discussions about the linkage fee last time around, those are flexible funding sources that we may be able to use for capital programs. Just as the city is doing, all of the other cities indicating that they're pairing tax and bond financing with 4% tax credits. and they're also tracking and doing similar work that the city is doing. In the report, we're recommending maintaining the current preservation initiatives, the staffing level, and augment staff when there are funding sources available to do that. But also, some of the recommendations include partnering with other agencies such as the county or state to look into all of those tax abatements or tax incentives and reductions which they control for us to start looking at ways that we could incentivize owners. But also to continue exploring funding and to continue with the funding that we currently have. The last 2 years we had funding for gap financing, but also to incentivize owners to buy down affordability of covenants. So we're recommending that the report before you is only recommending, basically the report only talks about the research and the findings, but it's also recommending council to receive and file. Currently, we're conducting a linkage fee stakeholder expenditure recommendation and comment process. That includes the preservation of at-risk housing, capital programs per se. Once the department is done with this process, we will come back with recommendations in terms of capital programs for preservation. That concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions.
You want to go? Please. So in the, if you could be a little more specific on both short-term and long-term, what recommendations do you have?
I think in if I may, thanks. In the short term, we continue financing under using the 4% tax credit program and bonds financing. I think one of the challenges is we have to make sure that we increase the staffing capacity in order to handle the load that's going through, particularly with HHH and its current status of uploading. The preservation deals have to have a priority as well, so we have to be able to staff to do that. I think in the short term, that's
I just heard him say that maintaining the staff, and it seems that we're in a crisis. We would want to enhance,
increase it. The only difference between what I said and he just said is I happen to mention the exact bond staff who'd actually do the financing and the preservation team as they're currently structured, which is another challenge at the current moment, is identifying the units and tracking the units, reaching out to owners and doing that outreach. Once a deal has been, or a owner has been spoken with that they're interested in, and let's say they want to go a certain path, then it's currently handed off to that group who can actually process that financing for them. So.
Go ahead.
On the, because I always get worried when we say we have to hire people, because it seems to take a really long time to do that. Is there a way, I feel like I've heard in the smaller cities where the bonding or the tax credit process can be done by somebody that's not the city?
Correct.
Is that a possibility for us or something that we should explore given the urgency that we have and all the different things that we have to get done in short order?
Yes, it's something we're currently exploring right now, taking a look at if we partnered with an entity to issue tax-exempt debt on our behalf or in partnership with our guidelines to expedite our world. It gets a little bit more challenging on a refinance, or I will call it a recapitalization or preservation. But like many things, comes down to a quick decision tree. But the first key part of what you're saying is, yes, partnering with somebody to help us assist that. We're in that process right now as well. The other key piece in the short term is having more funding available to work with some of these deals. Some of them may not need a lot of rehab or a lot of assistance or something else like that. It may be a small something that's needed, but currently the funding sources we have great restrictions on them. So sometimes you have to put a 55-year covenant on something, and you're looking at a mom and pop who's come out of their business and they've only had a 30-year covenant because that was the old rules, and they're not looking at doing another 20 years or 30 years of anything, but they're willing to talk to you about 10. And if we just had a funding source that we could talk to them about 10 in the short term, we'd be having much more success and longer conversations. And it tends to be the children of the adults who are now in charge of the property. So it really becomes key as they start doing their future planning of what's going on with the property. When we came previously, we talked about a local ordinance inside the city with requiring for notification requirements. With the state package that was passed last year, they changed those requirements. So one of the things, I'll say they toughened it up, but it also had some new challenges. So we'll need to, in the short term, coordinate better to see where we can get a local ordinance that actually helps us better have conversations with properties and makes them notify us and give us the appropriate information we need to actually have these conversations with them. Long-term conversations, if you take a look at New York and Chicago, they provide tax relief. That is a very long conversation with many governmental entities to do so, but it is an effective incentive to have somebody come in and say, your taxes are lowered based on the affordability you're requiring, and all of a sudden that interests them a little bit because it really didn't hit them in their bottom line the same way as other things might have. It might help them along the way. So that's one of the long-term ones. We've talked about linkage fee, and we're doing studies with outside groups for using that for permanent supportive housing. I'll call that not permanent supportive housing, just affordable housing and preservation in general. I'll call that a midterm impact, but really it's got a little bit longer term than a year in my eyes, to lay out a program where we can start targeting specific things. In the report, there's discussions about rehab programs with certain types of properties. You've had conversations before you about what we call NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing, which is also being looked at by the linkage fee, which is also what other cities are looking at inside this preservation report. So we actually have a lot of things going on that either others are looking at or that we're already doing and a step ahead of them. And I do actually just want to give one kudos. Last year, Franklin was called to give a presentation on preservation activities because other states, particularly high-cost states, other states, were trying to figure out what to do and how you were monitoring, and they asked Franklin how the city of Los Angeles is doing it because most of them don't even have the tracking capability that we currently have. So in a lot of areas we're leading, in a lot of areas we're still challenged as a group. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I'm kind of intrigued by the point you made about greater flexibility in extending covenants.
Yes.
And sort of negotiating length of extensions and so on. And in talking that, can you talk that through a little bit with regard to the comparative cost of extending covenants to greenfield construction, first of all, but also how does it change over the time spectrum? If you have a 5-year extension compared to a 55-year extension, let's say. I mean, is there some way that are there some market principles that apply to the cost of extension?
There are. So when you're doing the math, we'll just call it, you should kind of like bring it back to a net present value state so that you may be putting out money now for a shorter term, but you're putting out less money now than you would over the long term. New construction takes a great deal of cost and a great deal of time. We know that each new construction deal is about 3 to 5 years. And every time we build something new, we lose something that we can't get back in a key location where usually the values have got so high we can't deal with. Purchasing and having a flexible source that doesn't have a timeline associated with how long the affordability has to be. Home says a certain amount of time. The state tax credit says 55 years. Everybody has a long period of time. If we have something that says we start at 5 years and we're covering the net present value difference of what the market value of that rent would have been to the affordable on the discounted sliding scale, if you will, and we're locking in that for that period of time, fantastic. Fantastic. You're kind of getting what you pay for over time, but it's the same thing you're doing over 55 years. The challenge is, yeah, you got it over the long time on the new construction, but the older stuff where it's coming, it's very difficult to even have any conversation with them. If you don't have something involved with them, they're already able to leave.
So pricing the extension of the covenant is really looking at that vector between whatever the market rate would be for that older building, not a new building, but for the building in its current state, with the whatever you set your affordability rate at.
Yes, whatever that.
Okay.
That
and
rate
then
is.
presumably you have to throw in a little extra for the property owner to make it worth their while to do that, so that it's not just the vector, it's going to be the vector plus some percent.
And that can vary, so that's a negotiation. So it could be the vector. I'm not saying this is easy because all of this is challenging. It could be the vector. So let's say you're a property owner and let's say you need a roof and your roof is $100,000 and you don't want to necessarily take out a loan for that. And I come to you and say, look, if we can keep some affordability in here for a little bit of time instead of you going market rate, yeah, maybe you move some of the units up to the market rate, but you keep some of them down and we purchase that, and then that number happens to be $150,000 and you needed $100,000 for a roof and you got an extra $50,000 in a pocket, I think we all just won. I think we all just won that situation. But every time we get into a conversation with an owner, it is a custom fit. It is a custom fit conversation. And it has to deal with estate planning and children and all those types of things. So it can be a win.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think the more opportunities we get to take advantage of extensions and to give HCID lots of flexibility in doing that, it's a win-win. It's cost-effective. It's better for the environment. It doesn't result in displacement. It just we're spinning our wheels if we're trying to race to add more housing while we're losing affordable housing out of the back end. So we're just spinning our wheels and we'll never build our way out of it. One of the, I don't remember where I saw this in the notes, but one suggestion was that at the end of the extension period, there would be a rent cap negotiated consistent with the RSO.
Yeah, so the conversation took place as this. In order to part of the RSO, and there's a lot of legal issues, so I'll let city attorneys and others get involved.
That's what I was going to get to, because
it has to be, a voluntary type factor.
Okay.
And I was just saying that if you were asking for money, perhaps you should be volunteering to go under an RSO structure for perpetuity. That doesn't keep you from going market rate, but it does have some protections for existing tenants as time goes on and the covenant goes away. So if the unit's vacated, it goes straight to market rate. But right now, some of those aren't under the RSO at all, and so we lose.
As long as you're negotiating that, and it's the rental rate increase just happens to be in the neighborhood of what the RSO is. There's not a Costa-Hawkins issue. We can do that because it's negotiated.
That is the thought process, yes, sir.
All right, good. Thank you.
Here's some motions coming. So, any other questions? Receive and file? Yep. Are we good to receive and file?
That's the recommendation in the report.
Yep. Everybody good with that?
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but I think we'll write them down.
Yeah, no, we'll
spitballing up here. So
motions will come and we'll go back with them. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's where we
Thank you.
the foundation. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, just write the motions. We'll do the extensions. And we've got to look at, this AAA